Good afternoon and welcome to Channel 13 News. I'm Sophia Lin and our big stories today come from Taipei and Wuhan. A major typhoon rolled through Taipei. However, our main story today comes from Wuhan, where forces have begun an uprising against the emperor. They complain that Han Chinese should not be ruled by manchus and there are problems with the new railways. Earlier in the day, there was an explosion as the forces in Wuhan were preparing gunpowder when police came. The forces fought back. The viceroy of Huguan has fled his palace. It looks like the emperor's armies are losing the battle. More on this from Royal Law.
Thank you, Sophia. I am in the city of Wuhan right now. As you can see, people are still angry. There's still some fighting going on. However, most people expect calm to return in a few days. It looks like the emperor's army is losing. That's what we see now.
Hello and welcome to Xinmin News. We start today with a story about Double 10 Days, also known as Shangshijie from history. We know it celebrates the beginning of our country. Our reporter Royalo has more.
What does Double 10 Days mean to you?
Double 10 Day mean that day we don't need to go to school.
What does Double 10 Days mean to you?
Well, it means that when it was the past, lots of people were fighting, but there, on the 11th time, they finally got peace. So they minus 1 day, so it means double 10.
What does Double 10 Days mean to you?
We can have holidays.
Thank you, Roya. Coming up next, we will have a story about 4th graders playing basketball in the social studies class.
Well, today we are going to be looking at Double 10 Day, which is coming up this weekend. It's actually coming up Sunday, and we will celebrate it on Monday. And as you heard earlier, Double 10 Day celebrates the Wuchang Uprising in October 10th of 1911. So this is now exactly 110 years later. And what happened in the Wuchang Uprising, you heard, was that basically things sometimes just happen. And people plan things and they try to do things, and then the most strange things just set things off. In this case, there were a variety of groups together getting ready to rise up against the emperor's armies, and they were in the city of Wuchang at the time, and they were preparing their gunpowder when some of it went kaboom. And when the police came to investigate, well, the people there knew that they were in trouble if they got caught there with all that gunpowder, and so they started to fight. And then their sympathizers in the army knew that, well, if they got found out, they would get kind of killed, so they started to fight. And that started a couple days of fighting, which, although it was basically over in the first day in the city of Wuchang, it continued throughout the province, and the viceroy of Huguang ended up leaving his palace and running away. And that was an interesting position because at some times he was actually, he was kind of at a level where he was in control at some times of almost all of southern China, all the way from Sichuan all the way over to the coast. But at this time he was mainly in charge of Hebei and Hubei provinces, what we know now as Hebei and Hubei. And he got run out of town. So they set up a government there with a good sympathizer, and then they decided to send out letters to more people in more provinces to try and do the same thing. And then finally, on January 1st, they ended up setting up the Republic of China government. But on February 12th, 1912, the Xuantong Emperor, also known as Puyi, he stepped down, and he was at the nice age of 6 years old. How many of you are 6 years old? Yeah, could you imagine you're the emperor of the entire land, and you're only 6 years old? And by the way, they're telling you bye-bye. So he was the last of the Qing dynasty emperors. And of course, the Qing dynasty were Manchus, and they came down from the north and had been ruling China for a few hundred years, and for part of that time doing very well. But the people at the time decided, number one, that they didn't want all of the hierarchy, all of the levels, and how everybody had to be in their own little place. And if a person was just one level above you, they had complete control over your entire life. They didn't like that. Okay? They also didn't like the fact that, these are not Han Chinese. They're not even locals, and they rule over us. So those were some of the issues. Also, the whole thought of a different form of government. And this did come up many different times throughout the Chinese history, and we did go through many different empires and dynasties during Chinese history, but this one was a move from a dynasty to actually eventually a republic. Now, the republic that came up at first ended up mostly covering in the south, and then in the north they had some strong men that would take care of everything up there. And that eventually made it so that Sun Yat-sen and Sun Yat-sen's policies and thoughts actually weren't put into practice until after World War I, when everything was weakened enough, and the Japanese made some demands on the Chinese government, and the Chinese government made that public, and everything broke loose, and we have a new government. Now, Sun Yat-sen is known for his three people's principles, and those principles are nationalism, democracy, but not coming immediately, and livelihood. Now, when I say democracy but coming in 3 stages, actually, he felt that right at the beginning, democracy was not really right for the Chinese people because they had been ruled for like 2,000 years by an emperor. Okay? So he felt that as he had been overseas and he had taken time to learn democracy, it was also something that the leadership needed to teach to the people. And then eventually they could go and slowly release power, and eventually the goal was to have direct elections, which is what we have now here in Taiwan. Now, when his thought of livelihood was mostly that the government would control large corporations, smaller businesses would be taken care of by local people, and there would be a little bit of wealth distribution, so not keeping all of the money in the hands of just a couple people, making it easier for everybody to get along and to grow as a nation, because his focus was on the nation, not on the individual. And it never was. And even to this day, we're starting to think more about the individual here in Taiwan. And it's starting to grow. For the celebrations, they've had parades, they've had military parades, but right now mostly what we do is we have the flag raising ceremony at the presidential palace, at the presidential office, and we have speeches, and we have lots of gatherings and all kinds of wonderful things going on the 10th of October here in Taipei City. So that's basically what we are celebrating for Shuangshijie, and I hope that you have a wonderful weekend and enjoy your day off from school, because you know what? That is part of the celebration too.